First and foremost, welcome specially to those people who have flown into Delhi from outside and they're braving this cold and this weather and this fog. Apologies for my throat. When you live in Delhi long enough and you keep traveling a lot, you don't get acclimatized as most of you would think that we Delhiites do get acclimatized, but we rather don't. Uh, I'll take you through a couple of slides that I've put together to set the context of Indian Staffing Federation and the staffing industry, where we've come, what's happened in the last couple of years, and where we intend to be, and where this industry might be. So empowering India, that's the theme for today, and I'm sure all of you have read the note which Suchita and the ISF team has been putting together. When I was writing this a few weeks ago, I thought that what is the easiest way to welcome a group of people? Because we use different salutations to welcome people. And I wrote welcome citizens. Only to realize last night that we are all meeting in Delhi and the word citizen now has multiple connotations. Some on this side of the table and some on that side of the table. Then I wondered that how should I welcome each one of you? So I'll go with the standard one. Ladies and gentlemen, all my friends and colleagues from ISF, welcome to each one of you. So what has the period gone by? Ritu, in her speech, Ritu Parna, our president, in her speech very beautifully articulated that there's a lot of work which has happened in this industry in the last couple of years and will continue to happen. This is one slide which gives a synopsis of the various stages of any code which has to happen. Mind you, this was 45 national labor laws and more than 200 state schedules which have been brought together into the standard 4 labor codes as we would know. Our country is a federal structure. We are democratic on top of that. Or maybe we are democratic and federal on top of that, whichever way you want to look at it. Depends whether you hail from Delhi or from states. With that structure, it takes a considerable amount of time for any act or any law which has a meaningful requirement for an industry to finally become an act which we can rely upon. So this is one of the slides that I put together to just show you that what's the various stages of the 4 acts. Besides this, I think a couple of other things require mention. One, ISF and its members put together, including a lot of you, are doing great work in championing the cause of Aadhaar linkage with UAN. And I think that's a great amount of work. Today, during the course of the interactions till evening, if any one of you has questions, I'm sure the ISF board members, as well as Suchita and the ISF team would be very happy to fill you in on those details. The second thing is the CLRA Act, the complete change to the national license that we were supposed to see as of yesterday, or at least in the last parliament session. It's not yet become a complete act, but at least it's in the public domain. Multiple stakeholder discussions have happened. ISF is also championing the cause on what happens to the national license. That makes life much, much easier, not only for our principal employers and our customers, it also makes life much easier for the stakeholders in this room and beyond, anybody and everybody who's part of the staffing fraternity and industry. So besides this, what really happened in India? One interesting data point. India jumped its rank of ease of doing business, and significantly, mind you. But if you notice, and I think the important thing to notice is, why did we get these ranks up? We got it because of resolving a lot of insolvency and the IBC. I think last weekend itself, we heard a very, very large tranche of almost $6 billion arrived in India to settle one of the steel giants' insolvency which was going on. And when you see the Q3 results of some of these leading bankers, obviously SBI at the lead of it, you will suddenly realize that a lot of them would show great results in Q3 because of the monies which have come in. So resolution of insolvency was one critical area which enabled this rank to jump. Dealing with construction permits, trading across borders. GST was a very, very large impact since 2017 to make this happen. And then starting a new business. As you know, India required, depending between federal and state or national and state, India required almost close to 100 different statutes, requirements, documents, registrations to start a new business, depending on what line of business you're starting, where you're starting. It would take almost invariably 174 days Today, states are championing to make that happen within 30 days or less, depending on the structure of formation of an organization that you put together. Why did I put this slide up? Because what I wanted to show you is the prior slide, which talks about easing of doing business from a labor legislation point of view, did not happen and did not get considered in the last 3 years of the jump of this rank. Now imagine that all of that were to happen, ease of doing business rank for India because of labor regulations and ease of doing business because of the labor side will further jump, and we can come in the aspirational top 50, which the Prime Minister and the government has been mentioning for a very, very long time. Another critical data point, what worked for India, was the continuous rise of the foreign direct investment. If you notice it for the last 2 decades, not just for the last 5 years or 6 years or this government and that government, I think the simple fact of the matter is for the last 2 decades, there has been a constant rise in foreign direct investment. You put ease of doing business high, you get a lot of foreign direct investment, which in effect means a lot of new businesses come and start business in India, and one of the key drivers to business is people. We are all in this room today because of those very people. So this is great, it's significant. At $60 billion, it becomes the top 3 significantly in the world and continues to remain there. I think this can only get better. If you look at from last year to this year, we are already up by about 28% in the first 1 and 2 quarters of this financial year. So we are still galloping ahead. What further worked for India? GDP growth rates in the last couple of years. And I purposely kept it on last couple of years, and I did not include the current year. I'll come to that later. So, see, there is a lot which is being said about, was this the only time that India has seen 7, 8 and beyond percentage of GDP growth rates? I don't think so. This is the only time. It's happened in the past as well. The second data point, that while this was good or this was great, what are we really comparing ourselves to? Can you compare yourself to very small countries with GDP of 100, 200 or 300 billion dollars? No, absolutely not. When you're a $1 trillion economy, and we are, mind you, $2.8 trillion, closer to getting to the $3 trillion, we have an aspiration to become $5 trillion. It will happen. It's just a matter of time. The question today is, when will India finally get to $5 trillion? It's not about will India get to $5 trillion. It will surely get to $5 trillion. The reason to put up this comparison was, you can compare a country of India's size, magnitude, and dynamics only to these. You can compare that to a China, to a US, to a European Union, and the rest of the world. You really can't compare India to this very small countries. And I think there we've done phenomenally well in the last couple of years. So these are things which have worked. Again, please add to this slide number 1, where I was talking about the fact that ease of doing business ranking will further go up when labor legislations and laws become easy. More foreign direct investment will come. More companies will start to invest in India, and hence more people and more jobs. So what did this really give to staffing in the last couple of years? And I think there'll be nobody in this house who would not believe this data point or would not accept that this has truly happened. We recently had the World Employment Conference conferring that we have today ranked as the 5th largest. So I think a round of applause to everyone in this room and to the staffing fraternity, to all suppliers, all partners, everyone in this ecosystem, some of whom who started 3 decades, 4 decades ago, and some of whom who are startups who just started 2 years ago or 1 year ago. I think everyone has contributed to this. Today, we are just behind the US at number 1, China at number 2. We are behind Japan, and then we are behind Brazil. They are just 4 countries ahead of us. Mind you, this data point is both about volume and it's about value. So we have to be cognizant of the fact that Indian value, when converted into US dollars, gets arbitraged by 71 times or 72 times. So we have an issue there, right? But when we look at volume, we are definitely galloping. Another data point was the report of 2019 done by IMRB Kantar for ISF, and it was widely circulated by the ISF team to all its members. That data point clearly shows that we reached 3.3 million people understaffing in the formalized staffing environment in the last 3 years itself. The other critical data point is that while we were galloping, are the number of temps going up as a proportion of the number of employees? And the resounding answer is yes. If you look at this data a couple of years ago, my organization went in for an IPO in 2016, so we were writing all of this in 2014. Back then, the data showed that we were just about 0.33, 0.35%, and two companies, incidentally, same year went in for an IPO. If you read the IPO documents of both or the DHRPs, they've both reflected the fact that it used to be, the penetration ratio was 0.35. Now, what does this penetration ratio mean? It means for every 100 employees who are employed in the formal sector, only 0.33 people were employed as flexi temps. This, 3 years ago, changed to 0.5. This, in 2018-19, is reported as above 0.7. See, in decimals, it shows very little growth. But for a base of every 100, going from 0.33 to 0.7 plus means that it has doubled itself within that base. And formal employment is just growing. So that's the power. Does it further have potential? The world averages at between 1.6 to 1.7% flexi staffing penetration. Mature markets like Japan, markets like US and Europe work anywhere between 2.4 to as high as about 4.5 penetration. So India, even by world standards or world average, is a third today. So if nothing changes for this industry, population doesn't grow, formal jobs don't grow, nothing else grows. Maybe a decade later, we would have just become double or triple of our size by the sheer fact that temporary staffing will start to catch up with the rest of the world. And if it starts to go to the mature markets, then it has a potential to grow by 5x or 6x. So critical data point for this industry and all of you. The tripartite flexi staffing in the last couple of years has grown 16.3%. This is part of that report. I'm just pulling out data from different sources, including this slide from ISF's report itself. This clearly shows you that while we are talking about the fact that there is this so-called joblessness growth in India, there is a huge transition from informal employment and informal economy to formal employment and formal economy. And at the base of the pyramid is people sitting in this room who provide that employability or that employment to a lot of this youth who are coming into formal employment for the first time. And hence, while the rest of the country is talking about joblessness and growth, there's a 16.3% growth year on year, and today we are 3.3 million. Two companies today from among us, among our ISF members itself, today rank in the world's top 100. This has happened 3 years ago. And constantly, in the last 3 years, if you look at, this is a data that I picked up from SIA, Staffing Industry Analyst. They publish a worldwide report every year, and they've been doing so for more than 5 decades. So they have some degree of credibility. They scan, and this is revenue. Mind you, this is revenue. This is not volume. If this was volume, these two companies from India would have actually ranked in the top 30, if not in the top 20. But unfortunately, because it's a US data point, they convert all revenues worldwide of all staffing companies into US dollar terms, and then they publish the report. Consistently, these two companies in the last 3 years have moved their rank upwards, and today rank as high as 69th in the top 100 in the world. Again, the top 10 also of that is among members of ours as far as India is concerned, but they're not Indian companies. They're either listed or hosted from US or from Europe. Another data point, in the top 10, a lot of them who are also in India and also members of ISF started almost 5, 6, or 7 decades ago. But these two companies from India started less than 2 decades ago, and they're already in the top 100. So the point I'm trying to make is that there is still a huge, we've crossed a long road, we've reached, but we've not reached the pinnacle of our success. We've not reached the end point of where we need to be. If you look at from the same report, which was widely circulated and I'm mentioning, in the next 3 years, that report mentions that instead of 16% CAGR, we would probably be hovering around the 22% CAGR. I love this data point whenever somebody throws this 22% figure at me. Why do I like 22%? There's one company, a leading banking services company in India, which has since the day of listing or since the day of its incorporation, almost grown quarter on quarter, every quarter by 22%. That company is HDFC. And which is why HDFC is such a darling in the stock market. So because of that, 22% growth, which is expected from staffing in the next couple of years and beyond is why I think we have this conference and why we are all sitting here. We have 100 members today, ladies and gentlemen, and we have 1.1 million lives and 1.1 million employability given by each one of you. So a round of applause to everyone in this room for doing an excellent work, not just for staffing, but for employment in India. So what are the benefits of the Indian staffing community or the companies? I think while there can be many benefits, I've just recorded 4 key points which helps youth, which helps economy, and which helps overall growth of the GDP of this country as well. First, these are tripartite agreements, and if you notice what is the goal of ILO, International Labour Organization, versus what the staffing companies and our ISF members mandate and manage is very similar. We give each one of them an employment contract. We give them wages which goes into their bank account every month, every 30 days. We give them social security. We ensure minimum assured wages. I think these are the things which are mandated by ILO, and we give same wage for the same work. There's no disparity on anything, whether it's region, caste, creed, gender, bias, or anything else. For the same work, any 2 people in a staffing company among our members can get the same compensation. And I think that's pretty important. The second important thing, as I was mentioning a few minutes ago, is financial inclusion. A lot of this youth has either transitioned and become 18 for the first time and got their first employment and first job. So hence they are coming into real financial inclusion for the first time. The second is that these people have transitioned from informal to formal economy. And that is why that financial inclusion becomes that much more important for those people as well. So financial inclusion just doesn't mean opening a salary account for this youth. It just doesn't mean that we will give them a salary every 30 days. What it means is you've given them a power to be financially recorded. That power gives each one of us what is called a CIBIL score today. That CIBIL score gives us the power to take loans. People sitting in this room probably don't realize that when we go seeking loans, we get it at the most handsome rates, anywhere between 7.9 to maybe worst case scenario 9 or 10%. There are people out there who don't have financial inclusion, who don't have a CIBIL score, who haven't had this kind of a formal employment in the past, would possibly be paying even today 30, 40 or 50% annualized interest rates. Just because we stopped watching the movies of Amitabh Bachchan of the 70s, where a lot of contractors would stand outside factories and snatch money as union leaders from the labor. Those kind of movies are not made anymore. Our movies are today made in Spain, they're made in Italy, they're made in London, and it's just become the new India. That doesn't mean that those things don't happen. That doesn't mean that money lenders don't today also charge to that part of India, which is not completely inclusive or included in the India that we today represent. I think this is one very big benefit of what each one of you are doing. The third is the economic wealth that we create. Today in one of the panels after this, Mr. Narayan Bhargav, who's one of our seniors in ISF, leads an organization, will talk to you that how economic wealth basically propels because of money supply moving or money moving. It's called a GDP multiplier. There are enough and more statistics which show worldwide that people at the base of the pyramid have the maximum income which goes into spending. Those people do not conserve income in terms of idle assets. Idle assets are what? Gold, jewelry, diamonds. I'm not saying please take them all off and sell them off tonight. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying that buying a house or buying multiple homes in a place like Mumbai or Pune or Hyderabad is taboo. All I'm trying to say is, to a lot of extent, those are idle assets. Those are not assets which move the GDP. Those are not assets which move the economy. But people at our front line, the ones that we give to our customers, typically spend their entire income on purchase of goods and services. By their spending is what propels the GDP. It propels the economy. So what each one of you are doing is actually taking the money from large corporates, pushing it downwards, giving it to these people who then start consuming a lot of goods and services. And then the benefit of social security. Very recently, I was at one of the conferences where our Honorable Minister was speaking of labor. And shortly after him, the chairman of EPFO was speaking, the CEO. One of the critical data points that actually back then I also didn't know is that he turned around and said that in the last couple of years, all the new UAN numbers and the new people who are getting recorded in EPFO are there. 40% of this is coming from only staffing companies and manpower suppliers. 40%. We are not 40% of the Indian employment, but you are adding 40% of employees to EPFO. That's the power of the people in this room. EPFO. ESI would be a slightly different data point because it cuts at a certain salary level. Yeah. Because it cuts at a certain salary level, it will be not a data that you can rely on to say that it does or does not benefit. Because whether it's a principal employer directly taking an employee or whether it's any one of us in the manpower supply business, you have to cut it at 21,000. You don't have a choice. So it's an unreliable data point. That's why EPFO. While all the good things happened, and I said I'll come to that slide later, I think one of the things which we must also accept, whichever side of the aisle we are, whosoever we do trust or do believe from our parliament, doesn't matter. Whosoever we do vote for, the important fact of the matter is that the GDP is actually coming down. If you look at the Q2 GDP results, it was the worst in the last 6 years. But again, in our panels, we will have this discussion. This is, mind you, not the first time that the GDP is coming down, and it will not be the last. Every economy goes through the cycles of ups and downs. Every economy goes through this cycle of a recession or a boom. And I think we must accept it with a smile. We must accept that there are things that need to be done and moved on. But I think credit goes to all the people who are part of staffing. Credit goes to all the people who are encouraging this frontline workforce to go to our customers to work every day. And I think some of these data points can change. And why would they change? So a lot of you would ask that, you're saying these slides are great, India is going upwards. Suddenly you show a slide which is bad, India is going downwards. And then yet you're saying you have this optimism that India is going to change, and India is going to do well, and staffing is going to do well, and each one of us are going to do well. For the simple fact that we have a demographic dividend which none of the other countries out of those pack of big ones that I compared India to in terms of GDP has. The critical data point here is, if you notice the last 30 years on the employment share on the left-hand side, we had 63% of our population giving us 27.3% of the GDP from agriculture. If you do a little bit of simple maths, it will tell you that in the year 1991, and it will obviously worse in 1970 and worse in 1947, and I obviously didn't go there. I took about 20, 30 years after the Green Revolution. If you look at simple maths, it meant that for every 1% of GDP contribution coming from agriculture, 2.3% of Indian population was involved in 1991 in agriculture. And agriculture is the lowest paying as far as any GDP is concerned. Now look at 2018, 43.9%. So good thing is that 20 percentage points we went downwards. That means we moved these people, this 20% of the people, upwards into either services employment, or we moved them into industries or manufacturing jobs. This is how the progression of any nation takes place. You look at America 100 years ago, look at Europe, look at Japan, look at Korea, look at anything that you want to compare with, including China, that we famously compare ourselves to. This is exactly how the transition takes place. People leave the land, they migrate to semi-urban areas, then they migrate to urban areas, and that's how employability goes up, that's how formal economy goes up, that's how incomes go up, that's how the average income threshold goes up, and that's how poverty comes down. So that's a typical cycle of any of the countries. What hasn't unfortunately happened is that while 20 percentage point of people came down and obviously moved to services and industry, our GDP percentage from agriculture came down from 27 to 14.5%. If you now do the same maths that I was telling you to do earlier, for every percentage point in 2018 from agriculture, which is 14.5, in 2018, we used 3% of our population. So while we moved 20% of the people out of agriculture to goods and transportation sector, to construction, and then from goods and transportation sector and construction, they go into entry-level manufacturing jobs. Then from entry-level manufacturing jobs, they go into services. That's the ecosystem. This ecosystem is not for the people who've educated thanks to their parents sitting in this room, who knew English as good as their mother tongue. This is for rural India I'm talking about. So you'll have to put yourself in their shoes and then see how it happens. They don't just walk out of a great college and suddenly get that great fancy job with one of the MNCs. They have to go step by step, moving from village to a life in urban. Unfortunately, at this time, China has just 20% of its population in agriculture, whereas we are double of that still employed in agriculture. And they contribute almost 17-18% of the GDP. So it's like to like. For every 1% of GDP from agriculture, 1% of person is employed. We are 3. So the point I'm trying to make is, if nothing changes, tomorrow morning babies stop getting born, we still have to take care of another 20% of India. 20% of India is the population of USA, 350 million. That's 20% of India today, almost. We have to take care of 20% of India, which will move out of agriculture, move out of rural in the next 20 years. And I'm sure most of you would. But during this period, as I was trying to say, that people move out of agriculture and out of what is called the informal economy, people move towards what is called salaried and paying jobs. This is where the worker transition takes place. This is where the largest demographic dividend benefit should come to India, which is where people from agri will go to goods and transportation sector, to construction, to entry-level manufacturing, and then eventually come into our formal economy. On this one data point, even today in 2019, India ranks one of the lowest in the world. We have only 16% of our population today also who are in formal jobs, who are in a contract, who have salaries coming along with social security at least every once in 30 days. It is as bad as Africa. There's no other country which has a data point as worse as that. Even Pakistan and Bangladesh are better than us. They have 30% of their workforce in formal economy. So what does the decade ahead look like? Now, no scientist made this. All we did was, we took the last 3 years. This is the data that ISF shared with each one of you. We took the last 5 years, plotted on the trajectory, on the growth rate of various data points. We took the 22% compounded annual growth rates, CAGRs, that we are expecting the staffing to get, and we extrapolated what will change for this economy. The first data thing which will change is obviously by 2030, a decade from today, India will become the most populous country in the world. We'll continue to remain the most populous and continue to grow our population till 2052. By 2052, we will start to go into declining birth rate. And declining birth rate only happens when the number of deaths exceed the number of births. Why will that happen? Just look around, your friends, your family. Just 2 generations before, 20 years ago, we knew everybody who had minimum 3 kids. Everybody who practically got married. Whether the marriage got saved or did not get saved after 3 kids, I'm not taking a shot at that. That's personal choice. All I'm trying to say is that everybody almost got married. Everybody almost had an average of 3 kids. And if you went into rural India, if you went into family which was in villages, 4, 5, 6, pretty known. Today, a lot of you, just think among yourself, how many of your friends are not even married? And they are already 40. How many of your family members, young siblings, are not even planning to get married? They may adopt at a later stage. You can still do that. Indian laws have changed. Adoption laws have changed, so you can do that. And those who are married also are married without kids, married with just 1 child. This has become an urban phenomena because of many other things, and I'm not getting into that today. Because of that urban phenomena, it's starting to percolate down into semi-urban and then into rural India. So growth rate of population will eventually start to subside from 2052, but till then, India will have a benefit of population. The labor force participation or the working age in India is considered by our statute. Our statute says no child below the age of 18 can be given a day of employment. So hence, we take the working population as everybody above the age of 18 going right up to an average of 60. Different companies may have different cuts, 56, 58, 60, 62, but that's the population that we take. And then comes the labor force. Labor force are people who are desirous among that 18 to 60, desirous to get a full-time employment, but are or are not getting it. Among this, our gender disparity is the worst. And yesterday also there was another note from global sources which said our gender disparity among boards, our gender disparity among parliament, and among many other things are worse, not just among employment. In employment, we have, in population, we have about 49% of women for about 50 point some percentage of men in this country. But when it comes to working, less than 27% of the women work, right? Because of that, our labor force participation is fairly low as a comparison to people who can ideally be employed between 18 and 60. However, you see how quickly this trickles down. The labor force gets divided into formal and informal. This is all in the ISF report. So this slide on the left-hand side I've taken from the ISF report. This is the work that the Quest data scientists have done. So this is the formal and the informal economy. That further splits into temporary and permanent jobs. That further splits into fixed-term contracts. That further splits into tripartite and bipartite contracts. We are all here as staffing federation and as staffing industry into tripartite contracts, which means we have a principal employer and a customer. We have among us ourselves, which is the staffing companies, and then we have that human or that youth that we hire, and that becomes the tripartite contract. If you extrapolate the population growing at just 2%, if you extrapolate the workforce growing at more than 4.5%, which it is, and I'm still not adding the gender benefit to it, that women workforce participation in India starts to climb, which it is currently dismally low. If we start looking at the formal, informal trajectory, because we were discussing that more and more people are coming from informal to formal. If we look at the growth of the temporary staffing industry, within that the tripartite contract, which mind you in the last couple of years as per the IMRB report was 16.3%. In the future, we've predicted, ISF has predicted that it's 22.3%. I have not even calculated this on 22.3%. We are assuming for 12 years it continues at 16%. CAGRs which we've already seen, which our industry has already seen. The temporary staffing industry in India would be 20 million from 3.3 million. That's a 600% growth from where all of you are sitting today. I just hope some of your CEOs and MDs are not here, because by the time you go back, you'll suddenly get an enhanced target, because every CEO and MD will say, oh my God, that showed that in the next 12 years, India is going to grow in temporary staffing by 600%. So why have you guys taken such a short target? Within this 12 years, we will see some slowdown in economy. Within this 12 years, we will see change of governments. Within this 12 years, we will see situations like the automobile industry is reeling through today, or the telecom industry is reeling through today. But large economies, mature economies have a way to come out of these problems. And every downturn doesn't remain forever. So in the end, staffing industry can sum up in 3 broad contexts of the work that each one of you are doing. You're providing employment, formal employment, to a lot of entry-level youth. So I think you must, every night that people in this industry, whether you are the consumer of the service as a customer, whether you are the giver of the service as a staffing firm, or whether you are somebody from the staffing industry itself, please have a peaceful sleep at night, because you're actually going and giving economic benefits and wealth to the people who deserve it and need it the most. Minimum assured wages. We've spoken about the fact of social security and how it impacts and assured wages. In the end, this is a mantra for ourselves. I think for every one of us here, it can be the mantra. We create better lives. That's exactly what the Staffing Federation does. That's what the staffing industry does. Thank you.